Welcome to my channel. My name is Lisa Allistway, and on this channel, you will find a variety of inspirational and informational videos. So if that sounds good to you and you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. My guest today is Dr. Susan Hardwick-Smith, who is a board-certified gynecologist specializing in women's midlife wellness, hormone optimization, and sexual wellness. She is the founder of Complete Midlife Wellness Center in Houston, Texas, and the best-selling author of Sexually Woke, Awaken the Secrets to Your Best Life in Midlife and Beyond. She also hosts a popular podcast and YouTube show called Empowering Midlife Wellness. I will be linking her website down below for your reference. Welcome, Dr. Susan.
Hi, well, thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on my channel. So before we get started, is there anything else to the bio that you would like to add?
Oh, I've got all kinds of different fancy awards and things like that, but you don't need to worry about that. That's not really who I am. Sometimes I read my bio, I'm like, who the heck is that? I'm a 54-year-old woman. I happen to be a gynecologist, and I'm going through all the same life things that other women are going through in midlife. So I just want to share those with your audience.
Fantastic.
And I have a dog, as you can hear, like many.
I can hear. Welcome to the show.
Yes, this is real life, people.
Yes. So I wanted to have this talk with you today because when women go through midlife, and I'm kind of defining that between ages of 40 and 55, maybe 60, if you want to go that high.
Yeah, we could be living to 120 these days in our generation. So sort of 45 to 65 or more. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know for some women, they are sometimes hitting a wall when they reach midlife and they feel unprepared by some of the challenges and struggles that come with midlife. And I'm hoping that through today's talk, we can talk about some of those challenges and then maybe give some recommendations on how to deal with them, overcome them. And so that way you feel better prepared by them.
Yeah. So I mentioned that I'm 54, so I definitely classify myself as being in midlife, and around 45. And as I mentioned, I'm a gynecologist and I had all the resources in the world you would think to deal with this, but around 45, all kinds of stuff just started to unravel for me. And that happens for a lot of us. It's such a melting pot of things that happen. Our kids are getting older and leaving home if we have them. Our parents are getting sick and dying sometimes. Our jobs are reaching their pinnacle, or we're wondering if we're wanting to change to something new. Our relationships are changing. And then at the same time, our hormones are changing. So it's a very tumultuous time. And without some guidance and some support, I think we can feel really lost. And we do kind of fall into a gap in healthcare for sure, where there isn't a place to see a doctor frequently who specializes in midlife wellness. And often we're just sort of pushed aside and told, oh, you're just getting older, deal with it, or dismissed. So I think it can be a very difficult time for a lot of women. So yes, we want to change that.
Most definitely. And that's what we call the sandwich generation. So women are kind of smacked right there in between taking care of their elderly parents or their young children. And oftentimes they will put their health on the very low end of the priority list. So I'm hoping one of the major takeaways from today is for women to put themselves back up at the top of the priority list, because if they're not feeling good, they can't really be helping the people around them at their best ability. So most definitely a challenging time in the workplace, in relationships, and just your own personal wellness. So yes. So let me ask you, at your clinic, before we get into all these challenges, what's the most common issue you see at your clinic?
So the most common complaint that I hear is a lack in sexual desire, or a change in our intimate relationships that is not in a good direction. Frequently in our mid-40s, and this happened to me, we can just lose our libido. And there's all these excuses, and I'll call them excuses because I had them. There's no judgment. We have children, we're busy, we're tired. As soon as we lie down, we just want to go to sleep. And so our intimate lives can start to dwindle, and then our relationships can start to fall apart. And we know the divorce rate does go up, and at 50, the divorce rate's quite high for a lot of these reasons. So hormonal balance is really important. A lot of this is hormonal, and that can be addressed very easily if you can find the right doctor to look at that. As we get into our 40s, even before menopause, which all of us know that's when our period stops, but for years before that, we suffer with hormonal changes that can cause us to have sleep problems, weight gain, mood swings, lack of sexual desire, as I mentioned, irritability, and we can feel a little bit like we're coming out of our own skin or that we've lost ourselves. And so that's definitely a really universal complaint. I mean, if we feel that we're alone in that way, which unfortunately many of us do, we feel like, am I the only one who feels like this? There's something wrong with me. You're not. Almost everyone else is feeling the same way, but we tend to not share it because we have shame around those feelings and feel like everybody else's life's perfect and I'm the only one who's struggling. And I think just talking about it in formats like this is so important to let women know that those things are so common and that there are solutions for them so that you can feel better.
Yes, yes. And it's not only, the lack of the desire going down, but that can also be painful. A lot of women start complaining that, sex doesn't feel good anymore at this age for a variety of physiological changes that are happening down there. So, coming to your clinic, checking out your book, those are all great resources to realize you're not alone. A lot of people go through this and there are solutions to it.
Yeah, so that's a really important point. All of our hormones, and we make 3 hormones from our ovaries that sometimes we don't even know this. We're not given much education about this, but estrogen, testosterone, and progesterone, all 3 of them play a part in our feelings of well-being. And when our estrogen declines, which happens to everybody as we approach menopause, vaginal dryness and thinning of the vaginal tissue, lack of blood flow to the clitoris, all of that makes sex not only not feel good, but sometimes be actually painful, like you suggested. And then, of course, we're, as mammals, going to withdraw from anything painful. So it can be something that can even lead to tears in the skin and bleeding. It can become quite an unpleasant thing to think about. So all of that can be addressed. It's not, even though it's normal, it's something that's not optimal. So I often differentiate between normal and optimal. There's a lot of things that are normal that are not optimal. We can certainly optimize those things because living over 50 years old is something relatively new. A couple hundred years ago, we didn't live past 50. So we've got to figure out ways to be able to optimize how we're feeling so that we can enjoy the second half of life, often even more than the first. And I promise you, it can be even better. So, approaching midlife from a place of optimism is really what I like to think about, as an open playing field of all these different things that we can try rather than a closing down or sort of a walk towards doom and gloom. And our culture doesn't support aging being viewed that way. So I think we've really got to turn that around in our minds and write a different story about what it's like to grow older. Because I know as 54, I feel better than ever. And that's not something that happened by itself. It took work and it took really looking into what's going on, and anyone can do this. And so I encourage women not to think of aging as something that they dread. It really can be beautiful to be older and wiser, and sex can be better than ever. So that's my approach to midlife. And it's not a fairy tale. It's something that's available for any of us if we work together.
Yes, yes. And that's another key message here, and a very positive one. It is not all doom and gloom. There is some great benefits to getting older. Like you said, the wisdom and the acceptance of self. And if you have a understanding and a great partner that can help you through this period, then even better, so the education is not only for you, but those people that are around you as well, so that everybody kind of understands what you're going through and you have that support.
For sure. So I encourage women, even before menopause, like in your early 40s or mid 40s, if you have the opportunity to start making a plan about how you're going to approach menopause, because it's going to happen to all of us. This is something similar to death in our culture. We don't think about it. We don't talk about it. And I'm not equating menopause to death in any way other than that our ovaries do stop functioning. It's going to happen, and we can make plans around it and see it just as a normal part of life that we can make plans to address. So I encourage patients to come in their early 40s, sort of check their hormones. We can try to estimate when we think menopause will happen based on some hormones that we look at, and then make a plan for, these are the things that you might expect. This is what can happen, and this is what we can do if it does happen, so that it doesn't just hit you as a big surprise, like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Why am I gaining weight? Why am I not sleeping? Why am I irritable? It's something that we expect in a way, and then we can address as it happens. And I think that makes it a lot more manageable, just the conversation about what happens in perimenopause, so that we're not completely left in the dark.
Right, right. I think one of the biggest symptoms of perimenopause and menopause that is an absolute, like, in your face, you're going through it, is the hot flashes and the night sweats. So
Yeah.
let's talk about that, because you can't deny that. You are either sweating or getting hot. And what would you recommend women do to kind of manage that?
Well, that's a direct symptom related to low estrogen. So each of those hormones, the estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, has different side effects when they go away. So when estrogen disappears or gets below a certain level, our temperature sensitivity is all off. And so it's very common to wake up at night soaking wet. That would happen to me. I'd be drenched and have to change the sheets or change my night clothes. And then your sleep is destroyed for the night. And so you're exhausted the next day. I'd be about to do a talk or something like this type of a thing, and I turn bright red and my scalp would start prickling. I mean, it really can be terrible if you're in the work environment. It's awful for sleep. So that's completely addressable just by replacing estrogen. Nobody should suffer with those symptoms. Replacing estrogen, those symptoms are gone in 48 hours. So it's one of those things that's very, very simple if we know what the cause is, and we can just simply replace the hormone that's missing. When testosterone goes away, our libido drops frequently. We lose muscle, we lose strength. Again, replacing that can completely reverse those symptoms. When progesterone goes away, we can have insomnia and mood swings, irritability. So knowing what each one of those hormones does, we can say, hey, that's what's happening. And educated patients often will come to me and say, okay, I know my estrogen's low because I'm having hot flashes. I know my testosterone's low. And sure enough, most of the time they're right. And those are easy things to check. Those are simple blood tests that your physician can do for you.
Okay, very good. And so that kind of leads into the next one that I'm going to mention, is that the tiredness. And some of it is from that disruptive sleep, where you're waking up in the middle of the night, you're not getting a good night's sleep, it's stressing you out, and then it ruins your day the next day. So can you address the tiredness and the fatigue as a common symptom or challenge during this period in life?
Yeah, so sleep deprivation, and I think if you take it back to its roots, sleep deprivation often is the main cause, and hormonal change frequently disrupts sleep. So the most common sleep pattern is being able to go to sleep fairly easily, but then waking up early. And that would happen to me. I'd fall asleep because I was so tired, and I'd wake up and it would be 1:30, and I'd be, oh my gosh, I'd be awake for 2 hours and then toss and turn. And so that type of disrupted sleep leads to increased cortisol, which is a fat storing hormone. So we start gaining weight, we're moody and grumpy. Then of course, when you feel tired and you feel fat, you don't want to go to the gym and you want to eat ice cream and watch Netflix, which is what a lot of us do. So sleeping is critical. And so if we can start with a good sleep, often everything else gets better. But other things can make us tired as well. Just hormone depletion can make us tired. Low testosterone can lead to being tired. And low thyroid is frequently misdiagnosed. I can't tell you how many times I've seen patients who were told by their general physician that their thyroid was fine, and it really wasn't fine. Because you may know that thyroid, like most labs, is reported with an enormous normal range from like almost zero to very high, but we really want to be in the middle. So looking at your thyroid results with a very critical eye to make sure they're not just normal according to this gigantic range, but that they haven't dropped from previously. So very frequently low thyroid's a reason for fatigue, and it's misdiagnosed very, very frequently. So that's something that we look at very closely. Low iron, also very common. Especially if we're having periods, we're losing blood every month. So there are lots of reasons for fatigue. But the primary one that we need to start with is sleeping well. And that's where everything starts. Yeah.
Yes. Sleep, health. I can't stress it enough to prioritize. They say to get like 8 hours a night. I feel good on 9 hours a night. It's definitely something that needs to be prioritized. And if that means like no social media after 8 o'clock or before 8 o'clock in the morning, keep your phone out of the room, keep away from the blue light. Don't have the TV in the bedroom. There's lots of things that you can do to create a nice, restful sleep environment to at least give you a chance to have a good night's sleep.
Yeah, and that's there's so much science around that. I'm glad you brought that up. And I grew up in the culture. I was a OBGYN for most of my career. I delivered babies and had sleepless nights were just sort of part of life. And it was almost revered in that generation to sleep less and work more. And the common thing people say, I'll sleep when I'm dead. I'll work, I need to work hard now. And that's such an unhealthy culture. I mean, we need to prioritize sleep just like we prioritize everything else. I mean, because that really is probably the most important part of the day. During the time that we're sleeping, we're clearing a lot of chemicals from our brain to prepare us for the next day. Our hormones are stabilizing. So when patients come and see me who are fatigued and foggy and can't remember things and they're gaining weight around the middle, there may be a lot of things going on, but I guarantee poor sleep hygiene is probably the most important one. And I struggle with that myself. I still do. It's not easy.
Yeah. Sleep is when your body is repairing itself. And then it's also helping you emotionally. Like if you have some emotional issues, they say sleep on it for a reason, because you need that period of repair. They don't say stay up on it. They say sleep on it.
That's right. And I understand having been a chronic insomniac and an extraordinarily over busy person for most of my life, I used to put sleep as the thing I did when I run out of other things to do. I would work late and get up early. And when I had a few hours, I'd catch a few hours of sleep. And that's really a setup for burnout and depression and weight gain and relationship disorders and all kinds of things. So we know that that's true, but for some reason, some of us like me think we're the only one who's not going to be affected by that. And we just power through it. But I think just to start with that acceptance that we need to sleep well, that's a really great start.
Yes. And so here's another one that we've kind of touched on, but let's go into it deeper. And that is the weight gain struggles in midlife, especially the belly fat. So let's talk about why that's such a challenge.
Yeah. So I've given a lot of different talks about why we get fat in menopause around the middle. And it's really interesting. There's so many factors and they all sort of conglomerate together. So hormonal change is part of it. Several hormones change that contribute to weight gain, starting with the sleep deprivation, which is so common. Cortisol goes up. Just stress makes cortisol go up, and cortisol is a fat storing hormone. Often we become more sensitive to insulin. Many of us are insulin resistant, which is a pre-diabetic condition. And even if it's not diagnosed as pre-diabetes, we may be able to show that you're insulin resistant looking at some blood work. Insulin's another fat storing hormone. Unfortunately, directly related to consuming sugar and carbohydrates. So most of us know that we need to adjust our nutrition as we get older. Thyroid, often misdiagnosed, as I mentioned, is another hormone that causes us to gain weight. And then with all of those things going on, as we talked about, we don't feel good. And if we don't feel good, I don't want to go to the gym. I don't feel like, putting on clothes and going to work out because I'm not comfortable with my body. And so it becomes a vicious cycle where if I don't feel good, I want to eat comfort foods and I don't want to go to do the exercise that I need to do. And so it sort of gets worse and worse. And then there is just a physiologic reality that as we get older, our metabolisms slow down. So I hear every day, and I had this complaint myself, I didn't do anything differently, but I gained 7 pounds this year and I'm 45 to 50. Well, I empathize with that, but we have to do things differently. You're exactly right. If you do the same thing, you will gain weight. We don't handle calories the way that we used to in midlife, and we are going to have to change our eating habits a little bit. And I still love eating lots of healthy food, but for almost everybody, as we know, most of us could write a book on nutrition at this point. Lowering sugar and carbohydrates and increasing protein becomes really important. And the other thing that's really important is adding some strength training into your exercise routine, even if you've never done it your whole life, because we lose muscle mass. And as we lose muscle, basal metabolic rate drops and we can burn fewer calories. So it just becomes a vicious cycle where it's like, oh my gosh, I'm getting fat around the middle. My muscles are getting smaller. And yes, if you look at the history of women getting older and what they normally look like, that's what happens. But we don't have to do that. We can. Yeah.
One of the signs that I see in women is that they may have been a pear shape their whole life. And then all of a sudden menopause hits and now they've taken on more of that apple shape. Right. Because of the central obesity tends to just pack on in that area. And like you said, women might not be doing eating any more than they used to, or exercising the same amount as they did before. But the fact is we have to eat less and exercise more, unfortunately, if we want to maintain that weight that we had when we were younger.
Yeah, that's true. And it's not as dreadful as it sounds. I mean, I've been able to personally, I'm 54. I exercise a lot. I added weight training where I never did that before and I actually enjoy it. I do it a couple of times a week. I take some testosterone, which is really great for maintaining and building muscle. I just eat more protein and have a little bit less sugar, but it wasn't sort of anything drastic that your listeners have to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be on a diet for the rest of my life. No, I mean, I love food. I love to travel. I love to enjoy good food. Often it's just portion control and just, watching things a little bit more than we used to. But we do not have to buy into this idea that just because we're getting older, we have to get fat and lose our muscle. That's just not true. We can maintain healthy bodies throughout our lives.
Okay, so I have a question with HRT. Some people might assume that it makes you gain weight. Is that a fact or a myth?
That's a myth. So what HRT is a huge, depends what we mean by that. So we're replacing, in my practice, we would use bioidentical estradiol, testosterone, and progesterone, which were the same hormones you've had in your body all of your life. So we're simply putting back what was there before. And if you think about it, the weight gain starts happening when those hormones start to drop, not when they go up. So certainly any hormones given in doses that are too high can cause all kinds of side effects like weight gain and mood changes and all things that we don't want. So hormones have to be given in very carefully managed doses. But if they're given that way, we're simply replacing what was there before. So that could happen to an individual, but my argument would be that it wasn't given in the ideal way.
Okay. What are your thoughts on intermittent fasting for menopause around that time?
Yeah, so that's an interesting, we actually have a weight loss program as an arm of my practice, and some of my patients do really well with intermittent fasting. There's some, there's some science that the fasting itself is helpful, but what I've found is most helpful for patients who do well with intermittent fasting is that there's a block of time of the day that they just don't have to think about food. So it's a very useful mental trick, if nothing else. So for example, if you're doing the common 16-8 type of a routine where you maybe eat from 12 to 8 p.m. and then fast for the rest of the time, there's just this lovely block of time when you don't have to think about food. And for many of us like me who grew up very obsessed with food, where we're constantly thinking about what we're going to eat next, or what's for dinner, or what's for breakfast, or how many calories, or all these different ways that we've filled our minds with food obsessions, there's a gigantic freedom when there's a big block of time when you just don't have to think about food. And there is some science that the fasting itself can help us go into a fat burning mode. So we offer it as an option. Some patients like it and some don't, but I think it's a great option for some people.
Right, an individual choice.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's another big one, and that is kind of more on the vanity side, the face and the skin and the hair changes that come in midlife. Some of that can be quite shocking. You might find your skin is itchy or more dry, or you might start to lose hair. So let's talk about some of those issues.
Well, all of those are symptoms of hormone depletion of different kinds. So when patients come in with those very common complaints, we can usually find the culprit, so to speak, by checking her hormones. So low thyroid would be common in all of those scenarios. Low estrogen causes dry everything. So dry skin gets itchy. It changes the nature of your hair. It feels more coarse. Of course, vaginal dryness. So all of those things can be addressed. I mean, it's really all about hormone optimization. So if our skin and our hair being the outward sign of how we're doing, right? It's on the outside, often is the first thing that we notice when things are changing because it's visible to us, but it represents what's going on inside as well. So at the same time, we can be losing bone, our arteries to our heart are changing and becoming more stiff. Our brains are starting to change in ways that can lead to dementia. So the skin and the hair can be really great indicators of what's going on inside. So, we really want to listen to that because it's telling us how we're doing. It's just we can see it. Yeah.
Yes. And the bone one is a big one. I think people will see it in their face. Like you're like, oh my gosh, my face is sagging or my face is dropping. A lot of it's due to the bone structure changing.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
It's just, and there are obviously cosmetic things that you can do like Botox and filler, but be careful with the filler and all that type of thing, that if you want to go down that route, there are some cosmetic options.
Oh, there's lots of them. Yeah. So, I mean, you can do all those things, and I do some of them myself. And that's great if you want to. And then listen to what your skin's telling you, because it can be pointing out a lot of other health issues like osteoporosis that can lead to hip fracture, and 25% of women who have a hip fracture die within a year if they're over 70. I mean, so these are things we really want to prevent. We're 7 times more likely to die from heart disease than breast cancer. And we tend to worry about breast cancer a lot, which of course is appropriate, but we don't think about heart disease so much. So, our skin and out here is telling us, hey, something's going on inside here.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And that was one I was going to bring up as well, is the increase in disease risk that can happen with the change in hormones that you need to be aware of and to get behind quickly so that you don't have a heart attack at 55, because there are women that do, and they're shocked to find out, what do you mean? Or breast cancer. I know with COVID and the lockdown, one of the unfortunate consequences of that was that people missed their screenings for a couple of years, and now they're finding out they have breast cancer. And so it's real important during these years to make sure that you're on top of your annual exams and you're getting your screenings for these different types of diseases.
Yeah, it's really, that's such a good point, because it's really, we're so busy, right? And I struggle with this too. It's really easy to think, well, I'm not going to go to I'm busy. I'm not going to go to the doctor because I feel fine. But waiting until you're sick is really not a great idea, because all of these things are preventable. So if you do all of this preventative screening, which is so important, like mammography, your colon screening, pap smears, bone density screening, blood work to pick up early changes that could show if you're at higher risk for diabetes or heart disease, then you're never going to get those things. But the thing is, we don't feel bad when we have pre-something. When we have pre-cancer or pre-diabetes, we don't feel bad. And so it's not going to draw us to the doctor. But I'd much rather see a patient for preventative care before she gets sick than see a patient who's sick and then try to undo those changes. So we're so lucky that we live in a country where we can get preventative medicine. And, in most of the world, doctors are only available to take care of the very ill patient who comes in and they're treating a deadly disease. If we seek preventative care, just like we go to the dentist, we're not going to all fall out, right? But and most of us go to the dentist, but for some reason we hesitate going to some of those other preventative screening tests. Because, if you catch an early stage breast cancer, 95% of the time it's completely curable. That's just easy to do. But, waiting is when we get sick. So super important. I'm glad you brought that up. Go to the doctor when you feel well. That's the best time to go to the doctor.
Yes, you must be an active participant in your healthcare. You cannot just wait until the bad stuff happens. Be on the front line of it, and have that relationship with your doctor.
Yeah, really good advice.
So another key thing, somebody once told me that like perimenopause, menopause is basically adolescence in reverse.
Yes.
So let's talk about what does that mean to you?
Well, so when we go through puberty, all of a sudden we've got a surge in all of these hormones as our ovaries kick in and start functioning. And we have all kinds of things happen. I've got 3 teenagers. We have acne, we have mood swings, we have horrible periods, we have all the things, not always, but the typical things that we associate with being a young teenage girl. At the other end of the spectrum, we have a huge surge in hormones as well. And so we can go through a lot of those same type of symptoms. But our hormones come on in a big rush, and then they get depleted rather quickly as well. So it does feel a little bit like that. I had teenagers. Well, I have teenagers. I had young teenagers when I was going through menopause, and we had a whole household of people who were having crazy mood swings. And it's not always easy, but it is normal, but can be optimized. So just don't feel alone if you're going through that and feeling like you're going crazy like I did. I really thought, because do I have bipolar disorder or something? I mean, one day I'd be happy, the next day I'd be screaming at my kids. It was very disorienting for someone who's usually pretty balanced. So if you have those feelings, you're not alone, and they can be addressed.
Yeah. So it's very normal for teenagers to be moody, and then they go through all the PMS through their 20s and 30s. And you think, okay, I'm in perimenopause and menopause, and I'm still feeling some of these PMS symptoms. They didn't go away. And in fact, they might actually get worse. Yes. Right. So the anger, there's a perimenopause rage that I have read about that.
My kids will tell you about it.
So the mood fluctuations and the PMS symptoms still continue on in perimenopause, menopause. One of the things that have really, I'm in my late 40s. One of the things that's helped me is I have a very good friend who's also going through a lot of these symptoms and challenges, and we'll call each other and we will find the sense of humor and the laughter and around it so that we can just kind of go, oh, well, that was ridiculous, or that was a weird feeling. I can't believe I reacted like that, to kind of recognize and then vent and release it, and so that it doesn't like linger. But I think just having like somebody who can relate to you and have a sense of humor around it is really important.
Well, just the normalizing of it that you're describing, I think, so important. And if you're lucky enough to have good friends, I mean, that's fantastic. Many women don't have someone close that they can talk to about such personal things and really feel that there's something wrong with them. I mean, there's a very common feeling like something's wrong with me. I'm the only one who's feeling this way. I'm going crazy, or they suffer in silence. And so this type of format is so great, just to be able to talk about it and say, yes, this, me too, that happened to me as well. And I wrote a book about it, actually, just in the hopes that just telling stories of my own and other women would help to normalize some of these things for others, so that we can say, hey, yeah, that this is something that happens. And we should be able to talk about it just like the way we talk about what we eat for dinner. But it's becoming more talked about now, but in the past was just a very sort of secret subject. I know when my mom went through menopause, nobody talked about it. It was under the radar. I remember now as a teenager, she was really moody at the age where I counted back when she was around 50, but we didn't talk about it. It was, very much.
It was a different generation.
No, we just said, oh, mom's just gone to her room. My dad would say she's just having one of her bad days, best to leave her alone. And so I think the poor woman was just sort of left alone. But now, we really want to, I hope we can talk about it so that we can have friends, like you said, with you and your friend, to say, me too, I felt that way as well. Yeah. And guess what? There's some things that you could do, like take progesterone or whatever the hormones you might be lacking that are helping those symptoms to develop.
Yes. And I know, like, when I have like some overwhelming, anxious feelings, exercise is a great outlet, just to like expend some energy, go for a walk, just to kind of get that negative energy out, get in nature. There's lots of things you can do to kind of deal with the emotions. And then for me, a big one is just recognizing in that moment and be like, okay, it's a moment and it's going to pass.
Yeah, well, that's the start of everything, is awareness. So yes, awareness. And then yes, it doesn't last forever. So that's some great advice right there. I think we get into trouble when we don't realize it's happening. And then 30 minutes later, after we've done some real damage to our relationships, we finally sort of snap out of it, or the next day, and realize, oh, yikes. Yeah. So yes, being able to be self-aware enough to recognize when those things pop up really quickly, and then do something healthy, like go for a walk or call a friend, is really great. But if we're not taught that this is happening, I mean, how could we be aware of it? So I think those are all really good pieces of advice.
Yes. Okay, let's move on. Okay, trouble concentrating, brain fog, like you're just like, oh, okay, what's that word? There's like, you're like, what is going on? Why can't I think in this moment? What's that about?
Yeah, so hormone depletion of many kinds affect our brain. So thyroid is a common one that causes brain fog. Lacking estrogen causes brain fog and memory loss. And there are tons of studies now about the importance of estrogen in particular throughout our lives for preventing dementia. But way before dementia, just that early memory loss, like where are my keys, or what's the name of that thing, or when you're at a social event and your friend that you know really well is coming towards you and you can't remember her name. That's happened to me. Or at one point, I couldn't remember my phone number for a few seconds, and it can feel very scary. Like I have a brain tumor, I must have Alzheimer's disease. But the slowness of our brains, although part of that is inevitable, and just that does happen with aging, that our brains slow down a little bit. Hormone changes around menopause absolutely make that worse. So myself, as a woman who's taking hormone replacement, my brain is maybe not quite as quick as when I was 20, but it's pretty close. And so, hopefully we can maintain that throughout life.
Okay, very good. So brain health is important, which brings me to my next topic that I want to address is alcohol use and abuse and misuse that women in midlife might be using as a coping mechanism and drinking too much. And obviously that's not good for your brain. So let's touch on that.
Yeah, so our relationship with alcohol changes as we get older too. I know, like most of us, when I was younger, I could consume and metabolize alcohol in a way that allowed me to function fairly well. But as I got older, that really was not the case. Even a couple of glasses of wine at night affects sleep. And we already talked about how important sleep is. Tons of sugar in most alcoholic beverages. And as we get more sensitive to sugar, that's one of the primary reasons why we gain weight, especially if we're someone like me who had a couple of glasses of wine at night. So I personally had to really reevaluate that. I can't have a couple of glasses of wine every night anymore. I used to be able to. Well, it's not can't, it's a choice. I choose not to because I won't be able to sleep. I'll wake up with a headache. And I'll
Does
gain
it cause
weight.
night sweats and hot flashes? Does it
It
contribute
makes
to
them
that?
worse. If we have low estrogen and we're having hot flashes and night sweats, alcohol makes it worse for sure. So I do like to have a drink. I'm not going to suggest that everybody needs to give up alcohol altogether, but we have to modify our relationship with it for sure. So there's some, giving up alcohol is great if that's your choice, but I had to switch to lower sugar options like a dry red instead of my champagne or my sweet white wines that I liked. And then don't get cocktails like margaritas, or they put a bunch of simple syrup and other things in them. You can have a little bit of tequila with some soda and lime and sugar and have a nice, with some sugar substitute, have a nice cocktail that's got very few calories. But in general, we can't metabolize alcohol like we used to. So giving it up is great if that's something that you want to do. And if you do like a cocktail and you can enjoy it in a healthy way, find something that's low sugar, low carb, that still allows you to socialize and do the things that you want to do. But I personally had to change that for sure. I can't sleep if I drink at night.
Yes. And moderation is key. If you go with the Dietary Guidelines for Americans recommendation, they say if you drink, no more than 1 drink a day for women, no more than 2 drinks a day for men. So that is the guideline that you could implement in your life today to get it in moderation. So stop at that 1 drink is most advisable.
And well, it's one of the things that is so easy. And this happened to me during the COVID in the early 2020. I'm a surgeon and we weren't working for 2 months. And like most people, we're sort of at home all day. And I started drinking wine at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And it's pretty easy to drink a whole bottle of wine between 3 and 10 p.m. And then sort of after a few weeks of noticing how many empty bottles I had in my recycling, it was like, oh my goodness, it's so easy to do. And when it sort of creeps up on you slowly. And during this really stressful few years that we've had, that did happen for a lot of us because it is a comfort for a short term, but ultimately causes all kinds of problems. So I'm actually grateful for COVID in that way for myself. It really got me to evaluate my own alcohol consumption because I was like, I don't think I drink much, but how come there's all these empty bottles?
Yeah.
It's easy to do when you're at home.
It becomes a habit after a while because you're using it as, either escapism or stress management or relaxation. And then you do it night after night, then it becomes habitual and you have to really watch and make sure that you're not drinking in excess and abusing it.
Well, the other thing I want to say is that if we're drinking, and I was doing this too, if I was drinking because I can't sleep and drinking a glass of wine helped me to go to sleep, that's just a really poor idea. I'll say from someone who did it myself, because it does help you to fall asleep, but you wake up as soon as the alcohol wears off. So you'll fall asleep and then wake up at 2 o'clock. So it's not an effective means to help you to go to sleep. And a lot of us use alcohol because we can't sleep. And then it actually makes it worse.
Most definitely.
So keep that in mind. I tried it. It doesn't work.
Yeah. And also because alcohol kills brain cells and like we mentioned dementia earlier, there's a number of studies that have come out now linking alcohol excess and breast cancer risk. And so there's, like I said, a lot of women that are getting breast cancer screenings and diagnosis right now because of the COVID lockdowns, maybe drinking too much, and now just getting kind of a shocker, at the doctor's office, like, oh, you have breast cancer now. So just be aware, try to lower your risk as much as possible and cut back on the drinking if you can.
Yeah, I always like sugar. It's just not much good for anything except a little quick hit fix. So keep it in very small amounts in your life to be healthy.
Yes. And that's a key one too, is sugar. Sugar is a big topic, especially for menopausal women. We tend to start maybe crave it. And that could be something to really watch out for, the weight gain, getting the sugar and the alcohol, and to just really, watch your sugar intake, even if that means you need to track it and write it down and have like a food journal so that you can be aware of like how much sugar you're actually getting in your day.
For sure. And it's a lot more than you think. And I've done this myself. Whenever we do a food journal, most of us are really surprised. Because I mentioned I have a weight loss program as part of our the services that we offer at my office. And it's very common, and I'm not judging anyone because I felt this way too, to say, like, I really don't eat that much. Like, I just don't eat that much. But when we do a journal, it's quite surprising how little things add up. And, sugar sneaks in different ways. I mean, a perfect world, if we could live a sugar-free lifestyle, we'd all be healthier, but it tastes lovely. It's wonderful. It's comforting. So I don't personally recommend giving up anything altogether, unless we have an addiction that we really need to do that. But absolutely, that's the number one thing that we need to change in our nutrition plan as we get older in order to stay healthy. It's just bad for us.
Yes, yes. So we went through a number of symptoms that people experience in their 40s and 50s and upwards. Anything else you would like to add to the list that could be an extra challenge during this midlife period?
Well, I don't want to make it out to be all bad, because really it's so
well, yes, we're going to get to the good.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It is a wonderful time. But that being said, I think it's really great to know what symptoms could happen. So if they do happen to you, don't feel, wow, that happened out of the blue. And then maybe you'll be lucky and you won't fall into that group. But yeah, we listed some of the more common ones. And then some people have some unusual symptoms with menopause, like joint pain.
Yes, yeah.
Which I've had countless patients diagnosed with things like rheumatoid arthritis when they really didn't have that. They actually just had hormone deprivation. So if you start developing unusual joint pain around the time of menopause, of course, it could be something else, but frequently that's a hormonal complaint. Loss of strength, visual changes. Often that's the time we need to start wearing reading glasses or change our prescription. So a lot of things can change, but they all can be managed. And there's nothing wrong with you. These are things that happen to most people.
Yes. Awesome. So let's switch gears about empowering women in midlife. I know that's a big mission of your clinic. So let's talk, what does that mean to you as far as empowering women in midlife?
Well, I think that starting from just this feeling that many of us feel disempowered in midlife, we're not young anymore, perhaps, and our culture sort of pushed us out of the picture because we're not that youthful ideal anymore that's shown on television. And we're, who are we? We're not fertile anymore. So our search for purpose and meaning can sometimes be hard to find. But the power comes in just finding who we actually are. I can say myself, I had all these different hats I've worn throughout my life as a doctor and a mother and a lot of other titles, but had never had time to really stop and figure out who am I for me. And so now in this time of life when my kids are almost all gone, one in college and a couple on the way, and I've got a little bit more time in life to explore those things, it really is a powerful time to find out who am I and what do I want to do. I've got half my life left. What resonates with me? Like I've lived all these years. What have I found out about myself? What do I want to do with these last, I probably have 40, 50 more years left if I take good care of my health. So it's a very powerful time. I've got some wisdom under my belt. I can make better decisions. I communicate more effectively. So I think shifting out of that mindset where we have become, the best part of my life's
over the hill.
Yeah, I'm over the hill. The best part, I wish I was 25 or I don't look like I used to in that picture. Just sort of shifting out of that mindset. It's like, no, I'm better now. I'm stronger. I've had a lot of tough life lessons. I've learned from them. I'm continuing to learn. So it's really a mindset change, I think. And there are anatomic realities that we have to deal with, and replacing hormones and things like that can be part of that. But approaching midlife from a position of optimism instead of this idea that we're just going towards the grave, that like, oh, wow, like now I've reached this amazing time where I spent 50 years learning how to be a woman. And now I'm just starting to get to know how to do it. That's a pretty cool place to be, where we're just starting to learn how to do this life thing, from all these lessons that we had. So that's where the power comes, I think, just seeing it differently. It's just a mindset change.
Yes, I've noticed in my own observation of older women that some of them come into their own. They start to take on new hobbies, adventures that maybe they didn't have the time in their 20s and 30s because they were caretaking or they didn't have the money. And all of a sudden now they have this adventurous spirit that they want to go out and travel and try this new thing. And it really is an opportunity of personal and self-growth around this time. And I admire a lot of women in midlife and older because of the wisdom that they're gaining and the voice that they're actually using, where maybe they didn't feel like they had much of a voice when they were younger, or they were timid or scared to use that voice for whatever reason. So there is something very empowering about this age. And if you're not there yet, get ready, because once you come into it, it is an awesome feeling.
Well, so we're all going to get older, right? It's inevitable.
If we're lucky.
Yeah, if we're lucky, right? So just the idea of embracing it, I think, instead of fighting it. And I'm not suggesting not to get Botox or color your hair. I do both of those things. Not in that way, but just embracing the possibility that there is for such a rich life in the second half of life, and not sort of clinging on to, and I've struggled with this myself, like clinging on to, oh, I wish I was the way I was when I was 30, or that my skin still looked like that, or this constant clinging to the past, but rather opening to the future. And, some women do approach midlife in the way you've described and become very adventurous and take tennis lessons and learn mahjong and travel to Egypt. And others stay at home and sort of wither. And I think we get to choose which of those that we want to be. And
that is a great point. Life is all about
intentional choice.
Yes.
But I think the women in the group you're describing, and I aspire to be one of those, it doesn't necessarily fall onto them easily. It is an intention to say, hey, I'm going to wake up in the morning and I'm going to get my good sleep. I'm going to take care of my nutrition, all the things we've talked about. And I'm going to push my boundaries, do something maybe that I'm not comfortable with. Like I started taking tennis lessons as an example that I mentioned. And that's not a particularly easy thing to do when you're not very good at tennis. It's like, it's hard. I've got to go and I've got to suck at it for a while. And so, but I recognize the benefit in it. So just allowing yourself to kind of push through those discomforts, I think is so important. And then these beautiful things happen when we do that. Or I could just stay home and sit on the couch and eat ice cream. And a lot of women choose to do that too, but make a choice. I mean, understand that it is a choice. I think that's a really important place to start, that you can choose to be that woman that you're describing.
Yes. All of our life is all these choices added up. You're either on the path of decrepitude or you're on the path of wisdom. And these choices that we're making every day is going to put you on one of those paths. And recently I did a hike in Phoenix. I hiked Camelback Mountain. I don't know if you've ever done that.
Yes, I haven't, but I've seen it. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I did the extremely difficult trail. And part of my mind is like my younger self, yes, I can do that. No problem. I went out and I did it. And it was tough and it was jarring on my knees because you had to go over boulders of rock. And it probably took me longer now at this age than it would 20 years ago, but I still did it because my mind was still wanting to do it. I had a desire to do it. And it might not have looked the same at this age as it would have 20 years ago, but it's still an accomplishment. And I think it's important to be gentle with yourself as you're going down the path of life and aging and getting older, that, you can still do things as you get older, whatever it is. If you want to start tango dancing, if you want to jump out of an airplane, you can still do these things at these older ages. It's just maybe looks a little different, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful idea. Just, and I try to remind myself every day that it is a choice. And what do I choose for my life? Not to say that things don't happen that are outside of our control, and they do, and we deal with those, but ultimately the way we choose to respond to those things dictates the path that we have in front of us. And this is a great part of life. I think that each age that I've reached so far is the best age yet. And if we approach life that way, given that we're going to get older anyway, we can have that attitude or we can have the opposite. I mean, it just seems like it makes sense to choose optimism.
Yes. And I'm a big believer, like you said, don't dwell on the past. I'm all about today and the future. I am not about today and the past. So I think that's another key thing, because it's done. The past is done. It's about today and what we're going to do in the future.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we're getting here to the end of our chat. Is there anything else or some final thoughts that you would like to add with regards to empowering women in midlife?
Well, I've got lots of different things that you can look at and read and listen to, and the things that you could find on my website, which is drsusan.com, drsusan.com. And that leads you to my book and my private practice and YouTube and all the other things. So there's lots of info there if you just want to sort of read about different things and educate yourself, because it's really important to be educated, I think, because unfortunately you may not, or you probably will not get that education from your physician. You have to go out and find it yourself. And then I just encourage everyone to, approach midlife with a state of optimism. It really can be. I'm not sort of magic. I've been through a divorce. I've had all kinds of difficult things happen to me, just like most of your listeners. But we make out of it what we make. And I truly do feel better now than I did when I was 40, and I expect that's going to continue. And I hope that for everyone. So some of it's hormonal, some of it is medical. There are anatomic realities that we need to address, and that can be done. But most of it's a mindset,
Yes.
just believe. Yeah.
Stay optimistic, but also stay curious, I think.
Yeah. I love it.
There's so much to do in this world, and just don't pay attention to the number. That was something an 80-year-old told me the other day. She was like, I stopped thinking about my age around 50. She just stops thinking about it. She just lives. And I love that.
Right. For sure. Well, none of us know if we're going to die tomorrow or in 50 years. So it doesn't much matter how old we are when it comes down to it.
Yes, most definitely. Well, thank you, Dr. Susan. I appreciate you coming on my channel today.
Oh, it was so fun to talk to you. And I'd be happy to share with any of your listeners if they want to come visit me in Houston or check out what we have to offer. Be delighted to share.
Awesome. Awesome. And if you guys like this video, be sure and like it and leave a comment down below. Dr. Susan might jump on there and respond. And don't forget to share and subscribe and hit the bell to be alerted to when the next video drops. Thanks for watching.
Bye-bye.
Bye.